Hello and welcome to the I Hit Drums podcast with me, Mark, your teacher for this series. Today is part 2 of our lesson on flams, and we're going to start putting these flams around the kit now before looking at a few key grooves and then getting stuck into the first song in the book Intermediate 1 called The Flamming Licks. If you don't yet have the book, you can find it on my website www.ihitdrums.co.uk, and if you subscribe to the website, you'll also get access to a free groove starter pack if you're a total beginner at the kit. But let's get started today with Flamadiddles. Yeah, that's right, Flamadiddles. If you've worked through my first book, A Beginner's Guide, you'll be familiar with the paradiddle. A flamadiddle is basically the same thing as a paradiddle, only instead of playing pa-ra-di-ddle, we're going to make that first hit a flam. Flam-a-di-ddle. So the first half of a paradiddle would be right, left, right, right. This means that first flam is going to be a right hand flam, because we want that main strike to still be a right hand. And then the second half, which is normally left, right, left, left, we're going to make that a left hand flam, where the pa part of the paradiddle was previously. So we have exercise 1.6. We have 3 lines here. The first line is all quarter note flamadiddles, the second line 8th note flamadiddles, and the third line 16th note flamadiddles. These exercises all include a bass drum on the quarter note, so beats 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you play this exercise with a metronome, the bass drum should be landing on those metronome clicks every time. And hopefully if you've worked through my first book, A Beginner's Guide, you're quite familiar with the switching rates from quarter notes to 8th notes to 16th notes. But the bass drum can just help you keep a consistent time throughout. And it's also good to include this to develop your coordination. If initially you do find it quite hard to include the bass drum though, don't worry too much about that. Just focus on getting those flams accurate and working on the hands. You can always add the bass drum a little bit later on. So let's try exercise 1.6. And we'll play this at 60 BPM. If you find it gets too fast for you when it comes to the 16th note flamadiddles, that's fine. That can be something to aim for in the future. You could also set up your own metronome at home and maybe set this to 40 or 50 BPM, and that might help you achieve those 16th note flamadiddles. I don't personally think that playing for speed should be anyone's goal. You should always start slow and try and get the exercises accurate first. Once you understand the movement and the mechanics of what you're doing, it becomes much, much easier to then increase your speed. But if you're trying to go too fast too soon, you're just going to end up tripping over yourself. So keep it slow. Okay, so let's give it a try. Exercise 1.6 at 60 BPM. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, hopefully that went well. Some of you may have found that the 16th note flamadiddles were a bit too fast. Like I say, that's absolutely fine. That can be something to aim for in your practice. Let's give it another shot. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so now we come to a point where we need to start putting these flams around the drums. So by that I mean we're going to try it on the toms as well as the snare drum. On page 12, you'll find exercise 1.7. And if we look at the fill in the first line, we'll see we have 2 hits on the snare drum, 2 hits on the high tom, 2 hits on the mid tom, and then 2 hits on the floor tom. Now without the flams, the easiest sticking for that fill would be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, as this enables us to move around the kit quite freely, without getting our arms in a tangle as we move around the kit. So on beat 1 and beat 3, where we have those 2 flam strikes, they're both going to end up being right hand flams, because traditionally, without the flams, those would have been right hand strikes. Does that make sense? So what would have been right, left is going to be right hand flam followed by the left. In the second line, we have the same fill, only the flams have moved to the and of 1 and the and of 3. So without the flam being there, that would have actually been a left-hand strike. So the 1 and would have been right, left. So that means we need to play both of these flams as left-hand flams. In the third and fourth lines, we actually have a different situation. We have a snare drum hit followed by a bass drum, then a high tom followed by a bass drum, then a mid tom, bass drum, floor tom, bass drum. So this movement between the hands and the bass drum foot means that we don't have any kind of sticking sequence we would traditionally follow there. And that means that either a right-hand flam or a left-hand flam can be used in this situation. My advice here would be to go with the flam that you find the most comfortable. Now, before we try these exercises with the audio, I'd just like to add that when I recorded this, I didn't actually have a mid-tom. Most of these exercises include mid-tom hits, but to be honest, I don't really like playing with a mid-tom because that's where I normally have my ride cymbal. So wherever you see a mid-tom in the written music for exercise 1.7, you'll probably hear me play a snare drum. If your kit has a mid-tom, use a mid-tom. If it doesn't have a mid-tom, use the snare drum. Obviously, it's important to play the correct drum at the correct time, but sometimes and in certain situations, you might not have access to that. Once you start gigging, or perhaps you're already gigging, you might find that you get to the venue and the drum kit that you're using for the night is not the same as the drum kit that you're used to playing at home. So getting used to this ability to adapt to the situation you're in is very important. You'll hear a count-in before each of these different lines within the exercise. And to save time, you'll only hear each line once. When you practice these, however, you want to do them multiple times. So once you've had a run-through, you may want to rewind the audio and give it another try. Each line starts with the same bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat groove, just nice simple money beat, and then we're going to go into each of those fills. You may even want to try the fills first before trying the whole line. But if you feel ready to give this a go, let's give it a try. Exercise 1.7, flams around the kit. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so those exercises are something you can practice as much as you like over the next week. Being able to move them around the kit, I think, is very important. So don't just run through them once and then move on. But if you spent a bit of time with those, let's have a look at the key grooves for the song Flaming Licks. On page 13 of the book, we have 3 key grooves. Key groove 1 is quite a straightforward quarter note hi-hat rhythm, followed by a flam on beat 4. You'll find this multiple times throughout the song. Make sure that you play this groove with the hi-hats open. Key groove 2 is a fill that contains a couple of flams, and again, you'll see this rhythm a few times throughout the piece. Sometimes it's played as is written in key groove 2, with the flams being on the snare drums. Sometimes that moves around the kit. So whenever you see that pattern, that rhythm within the song, just check that you are playing the snare drum, because sometimes you might not be. Also, make sure when you strike the crash cymbal at the end of this groove, you're hitting it along with a snare drum and not a bass drum. Finally, key groove 3 is a pattern that features in the verse of the song, and it has a flam on beat 2 instead of a normal snare drum hi-hat hit. You're basically going to play the groove as if the flam wasn't there and it was a hi-hat hit, but instead of striking that hi-hat, you're going to move that right hand from the hi-hat to the snare drum and then back to the hi-hat. Again, which flam you use in this situation is up to you. If you find that the right hand flam is the most comfortable, then that is the right choice. If you find the left hand flam is more comfortable, then that is the right choice. If you'd like to give those a try, I'd recommend pausing the audio now and giving those a go. Otherwise, we're going to move on and start looking at the elements of the full song, The Flaming Licks. Hopefully, you listened to the introduction episode of this series, where we talked about different kinds of repeats and also other ways of jumping around the song. The song starts with a half-bar measure. This is known as an anacrusis and isn't actually bar 1 of the song. Bar 1 is where section A begins. So for the counting of this song, you'll hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then you come in where beat 3 would be, and you're playing 3 and 4 on the snare drum and the bass drum. You'll notice above the start of section A, we have the sengo symbol. Now, we don't need to worry about that at this stage because this is the first time that you'll be playing section A. Now, section A does have repeats at the beginning and the end of the section, so that means you're going to play all of section A and then go through all of section A again. And this doesn't include the half-bar measure at the very beginning. And obviously, this isn't the end of the song, so you can also ignore the word fine at the end of section A for now. We have another repeated section with section B. Now, this actually has alternate endings. So you'll see at the end of page 14, the last 2 bars have a number 1 over the top, and this carries on all the way to the end of the top line of page 2. That whole 4-bar section is actually the first ending of the repeat. Once you've played this, you'll go back to the start of section B, play those first 4 bars of section B, so that's bars 9, 10, 11 and 12. Notice how 11 and 12 is also a 2-bar repeat itself of the previous 2 bars, 9 and 10. And once you've played bar 12 the second time around, you're not going to play the number 1 ending. You're going to jump over to bar 17 and play from there until the end of section B. So we have a whole section which repeats, but the last 4 bars change for those 2 repeats. Now you may wish to listen to the track for this to get a good feel for what's actually happening in section B. But just to go over that again, you'll play bars 9, 10, 11, 12. At that point, you get to the first ending of the first repeat, which is bars 13, 14, 15, and 16. You're then going to jump back to the start of B, play bars 9, 10, 11, 12, and then jump to 17, and then play through to the end of the section. Section C doesn't have any repeats within it for its own section, but at the very end we do have DS Al fine. So once we get to the end of this page, we're going to go back to the sengo symbol, which you'll see at the very beginning over section A. So you're going to play through all of section C and then go back to the start, play section A through once, at which point you're actually going to hit that word fine, and that's the end of the piece. Now this may seem like quite a lot of jumping around as well as the repeats within the sections themselves. It's quite a lot. However, this is the kind of notation and reading that you need to meet the grade 3 standard. One last thing to mention for this piece is that at the very beginning, we actually have one of those dynamic indicators. So under the very first flam hit that you see in the anacrusis, we have an F, which means forte. That means you're going to play loud. From that point onwards, there is no more dynamic instructions, so the whole piece is going to be played loud. So right now, you're going to hear the full track with drums, and that's going to help you make sense of the navigation of the song. You can access all of the backing tracks at different speeds, ranging from 40 BPM all the way through to full speed by following the link in the book. If you don't yet have the book, you can find us on my website, www.ihitdrums.co.uk, and you're looking for Intermediate 1. If you subscribe to the website, you can also receive regular updates as well as getting access to a free groove starter pack if you are a complete beginner. So let's give it a listen. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.
Okay, so quite a cool track. I hope you enjoyed that. Between the exercises around the kit and the song, The Flaming Licks, that's quite a lot to work on. So that might be more than a week's worth of practice for you, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It depends how much time you can practice and, how quickly you learn. It's different for everyone. On page 16 of the book, you'll find a practice log where you can keep track of the different backing tracks you're playing along with, so you can work your way up those speeds, but also make notes on maybe bars to work on, things that you need to check, and also keep track of how many times you've practiced that song. It can be a really helpful process for you to actually keep track of when you practice. Then over a whole month, you can look back and actually see how much practice you've done within that month. And from there, you may decide you want to do more, maybe you want to do less, maybe you feel like you're doing enough. It can also be a good record of your progress over a year. But for now, we'll leave it there. Next time, we're going to be looking at 16th notes on the hi-hats and moving into some 16th note hi-hat grooves. But until then, enjoy!